Then he said, A certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. So he divided to them his livelihood. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with prodigal living. But when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in the land, and he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. Then he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet, and bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. Now his older brother was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what these things meant. And he said to him, Your brother has come, and because he has received him safe and sound, your father has killed the fatted calf. But he was angry, and would not go in. Therefore his father came out and pleaded with him. So he answered and said to his father, Lo, these many years I have been serving you. I never transgressed your commandment at any time, and yet you never gave me a young goat that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this son of yours came, who has devoured your livelihood with harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him. And he said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that I have is yours. It was right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead, and he is alive. He was lost, and is found. My name's Arthur, and I thank you for joining me as we share this story that Jesus told to again emphasize the fact that God would reach out to those who the Pharisees and the Jews would despise and bring them into the kingdom, but that the celebrations in the kingdom would be missed out by those who would surely be entitled to them, the Jewish people themselves. And so he refers to a certain man who had 2 sons. And of course the analogy is that God is the father, and the 2 sons represent the Jewish people and the Gentile people. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. So he divided to them his livelihood. In the story of Abraham, Abraham had 8 sons, but the blessing of the firstborn went to Isaac, and the others he sent away to a far country, that they might not invade the inheritance of Isaac. And he provided much wealth for them. He gave them plentiful gifts, and he gave them territory, and they went away. But they soon forgot his ways. Although his sons learned the ways of Abraham just as much as Isaac did in his father's house, when they went away, they forgot the ways of Abraham, and so began to live the way the Gentiles did. they wasted their goods. Well, eventually, those in the far country who had a knowledge of God but had wandered away from God ran out of their resources. Now, what often happens is that when we've been brought up in a culture, we don't realize that other people have other cultures and they have different conventions in their thinking. So when we're brought up with a Christian culture, we might think that other cultures and religions are also generous and hardworking and basically honest. But we'll find that they are not. The integrity that is so much a part of Australian culture is not found in many other countries. And when those people come here, they need to adopt our culture. Many of them do, but some of them do not. So this younger son in a far country found that he was exploited. He had friends while ever he had money, but when his money ran out, he had no friends. And so he sought employment and found a job looking after pigs. As a Jewish man, he'd been brought up not to have anything to do with pigs. And here he was, wishing that he could eat the pig's food. It says no man gave him anything. Did he work and not even get food? Or was it that, although he was working hard, he never got ahead? Nobody encouraged him the way he had been freely giving the possessions he'd had away to others when he had them. Eventually he realized that what he was doing was silly. His father had hired servants, and he looked after those servants. They had food to eat every day. They had food to spare. Here he was perishing with hunger. The sensible thing for him to do would be to eat humble pie, to go back to his father and see if he could get a job with his father. There at least he would be looked after. He would not be exploited. And as he thinks about this, he thinks, I will say, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. He recognizes that not only has he sinned against his father, but he has sinned against God as well, because God had provided for him, and he was not satisfied with God's timing and God's provision. So he says, I've forfeited all rights to be called your son, but I know you take on servants, so can I have a job as a servant? But not only did he sit there thinking about this, he actually did it. He did something about it. He rose and went to his father. And this is where many people fail. They dream about doing something. They think about doing something. They go through all the logic in their mind, but they don't actually get up and do it. This man went and did it. And he found that his father was looking for him. While he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran to him and fell on his neck and kissed him. The father didn't send an envoy after him. The father had to wait until this young man came to his senses. But as soon as he came to his senses and was prepared to come home and talk to his father, then his father was more than willing to welcome him. And so he ran to him, fell on his neck and kissed him. The son gives his apology. I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. In this way he humbled himself before his father. We have no rights before God. We have forfeited all our rights. We come to him that we might be his servants, based on his mercy. But what the father does is reinstate him as a son. He will never have the inheritance that he's already squandered, but he is still the son. And so they bring out a robe and put it on him. They put a ring on his finger to show his status. They put sandals on his feet. He was obviously in extreme poverty. And they celebrate a fatted calf. There's much about eating and rejoicing around food. My son that was dead is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry.